Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, a place to find connection and a sense of belonging, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about sensitivity and the richness that it adds, the strengths we have because of our sensitivity, and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there, to the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers. This is an amazing episode, and my guest is from Russia, and I know I'm going to butcher her name, so I totally want to not say it because I don't want to do it wrong, so I apologize. My guest today is Elena Truskova Lenochka. And I apologize for saying it incorrectly. That's the best I can do with my little American voice. This is really an amazing episode. And this guest reached out to me in one of the closed Facebook groups and has written a couple of blogs about the episodes. We talk about it in the episodes, so I'm not going to share too much. But what I love about this interview is we talk about not feeling perfect and not good enough and why this guest had some reservations about being on the podcast, even though she had reached out to me. We talk about some of the differences in culture, how her sensitivity showed up and how she managed that. She is an avid reader. She translates books from English to Russian. She's got a blog. She's got a podcast. She's incredibly fluent, well-read, versed, has done her work, has been in therapy. We talk about how she manages intrusive thoughts and how she manages intense feelings. And one of the things that she said that I love is, I'm not okay, and this is okay. Meaning that sometimes things happen that we're not okay with, but we can give ourselves the message that we're okay. We talk about some of the things that go on with families of immigrants. Oftentimes, parents are not fluent in an emotional language and how that can impact a sensitive child. We talk about travel and some of the things that come up for her around travel. But what I love is the overall messages that I got from her is, this is how I'm wired. This is how I come. So this is what you get with me, and this is how we work with it. And she really has this amazing ability to not take on things from other people. She's very human. She struggles with things, but so much of what I see with highly sensitive people is we've internalized negative messages about us. And then when we get more negative messages, we often think there's something wrong with us instead of being able to say to the other person, like, so what is this about this that bothers you? We talk about how she can change how she responds. We talk about anger, especially as it relates to women, and how it can mobilize us and it doesn't have to be a negative thing. I don't know. I just think it's a great episode. So let me tell you a little bit about my guest. And again, I'm going to imperfectly say her name. Elena Truskova Lenochka works as a project manager at an IT company named Yandex. Probably said that wrong too. I'm sorry. It's kind of a Russian Google, really a great place to work. She also has a blog with 500 visitors per day, a weekly kitchen talk podcast, an Instagram and a blog, and a Telegram app with 3,200 plus followers, similar to WhatsApp, and there are blogs without comment sections. A gift for HSPs, no criticism. She also helps with book translations and also holds online creative writing workshops. She's an avid reader. She reads about 150 to 200 books a year. And I'm going to put links to her Instagram profile. She's got a separate Instagram cat profile, all of her links where you can find her. And we talked about a lot of books in this episode, so I'm also going to put them in the show notes. If you are enjoying this podcast, you can really help me out if each listener shares the podcast with one other person. That would be amazing. You don't have to do anything. And what I find really helpful is I ask people, like, do you listen to podcasts? And if they don't, I often would say, would you like me to show you how to get it on your phone? I just want the message to get as far spread as we can. Now, on to the show. Hello, Ilyana. I know I already said it wrong.
Patricia.
So tell me again how to correctly pronounce your name.
You can do it in any way you want, but in Russian it will be Lena or Yelena.
Okay. And we had a conversation before we started recording, and I kept trying to say your name, and you can hear a difference. You told me it sounded cute, which means I'm saying it totally wrong.
No, you say it like a person from different perspective, I guess.
It's just interesting because I can't even hear what the differentiation is. Why don't you let everybody know where you're from so maybe they can understand why we're talking about your name?
I'm from Russia and I'm speaking from St. Petersburg. I was born in Moscow, but 12 years ago I moved here.
And the way that we connected is you're one of the members of the closed Facebook group Unapologetically Sensitive, and you contacted me because you write blogs and you wanted to blog about a couple of the episodes and to write them in Russian. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, I was listening to the podcast and it was so like speaking to me and it was so rare and so alive. And when I see and feel things like this, I totally want to share it in Russian for the people who do not speak or read English really well, to share the experience. And I asked for permission to do this, as I do with some bloggers whose articles I translate into Russian sometimes. And I thought that there are so many sensitive people in Russia, and maybe they are not aware of this, and maybe it will help them. So yes, I asked if it is appropriate to put my notes in Russian for some episodes to my blog, mentioning, of course, yours work. And then you said yes, and I did a couple of notes, and people loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was honored that you reached out to me. And next to the United States, the second highest number of listeners that I have is in Russia. That's above Canada. That's above Australia. I mean, people are listening from all over the world. But honestly, it's because of the blogs that you've written that we have so many listeners in Russia. So I really want to say thank you.
Yay, Russia.
Yay, Russia. Do you identify as a highly sensitive person?
Yeah.
Yeah. When did you find out you were an HSP?
Well, I think I always known that I am one, but then I read a book, that book of Elena Truskova.
The highly sensitive person?
Yeah, I think it was around 2006. So it was translated into Russian later, then you could read it in English. And then I read another book of Ilse Sand. Do you know her work?
I don't.
She's Danish.
Has she done a TED Talk?
So it's a book, Highly Sensitive People in an Insensitive World.
Okay.
And it's pretty like similar to Ilse Sand's books. But then when I read them, I just thought, yeah, this is me, whatever. It didn't really change anything inside of me, except that I understood that one of my cats, Faina, is actually also highly sensitive. And then it explains a lot about her and me and us being connected on some deeper level. But in the childhood, there was this Hans Andersen fairy tale about the princess and the pea. Have you read it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And in the childhood, I thought I am that princess and the pea.
Yep.
I think it's about the sensitivity because all of the labels on the clothes and all things are like cutting me like knives. So I understood her really good.
Right. And in the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com, I will put links to the two books that Ileana. I'm so self-conscious now about saying your name. I'm just going to know I'm going to say it incorrectly. No, it's not you. I just want to get it right.
Yeah, thank you so much for this consideration. And I also wanted to say about another book. I don't know if you know, it's Christelle Perry-Collin. It's French. There is a book, I Think Too Much, How to Channel Intrusive Thoughts. It was published in French, but according to her website, there is a translation into English, and there is a book in Russian, so I've read it. It's also about highly sensitive people, but I don't know, she doesn't call it this way. She calls it over-efficient brains. It's really nice.
Okay, I will link to that also in the show notes, so thank you very much. Is there another term that you wish were used instead of highly sensitive person?
Well, I'm okay with that. And also this over-efficient brain is also like valid for me because it just works all the time. I can hear it is working inside of me.
I like that. I like that term. Can you tell us a little bit about, I'm trying to decide which direction to go. Let's just start with this. You had shared with me that you had some reservations about being a guest on the podcast. Can you share with the listeners a little bit about what some of your concerns were?
Well, it's not so much reservation. It's more like feeling not perfect and not interesting enough to hold the conversation about myself. I guess it was the main concern for me when I went to therapy 3 years ago. I was just like, how will I speak about myself for 50 minutes? Like, what about, is there anything to speak about myself for too long?
Right, right. And before we started recording, we had talked about this, that the whole reason why I had the initial format of doing an interview was I thought, I don't have enough content. Like I couldn't do an entire episode on my own. I didn't feel like I had a point of view. I didn't know if I would stick with it. I think this is really common. And when I asked my husband to be a guest, he's like, who would want to hear what I have to say? And as we'd get feedback in and I would read him the feedback, it really resonated for especially people that have a partner that's not an HSP. And I have to say, I feel like when I want to use the sensitivity, I refer to him as being sensitive. And when I don't, I refer to him as a non-HSP. So I just want to own how I use that ambiguity to my advantage, and I am inconsistent with it. But as I got feedback and read it to him, like he was really surprised. So I think that we all have this sense of like, what I have to say isn't important. I don't matter. I don't have a point of view. And that can keep us playing really small. And when we take these risks and we step out and we're in an environment where we can get feedback, everybody has a story that's really important and valuable that people want to hear. We just don't always know that. I mean, what's your experience been? Because you also, maybe you can talk a little bit about your podcast and your blog.
Yeah, and I also want to mention that the thought that helped me jump to your podcast right now was that I'm living in a different country and circumstances and culture and language, and then we can test it. Is it really true? Like I believe that high sensitivity works out in the similar ways inside people of different cultures. Because it's really interesting to me. Will the audience, yours, respond to some of my experiences? Are they really universal? My blog is called Imperfect Stories, like non-ideal stories in Russian. And my podcast is called the same way, because I was thinking how to call my podcast. Oh, let's be simple. Let's just call it the same way. And it's really useful now for the blog because people who will search for the podcast, they also see that there is a blog with the same name. So it was wise decision. I was writing blogs, I don't know, for many years since I discovered the HTML and all this internet thingy. And then this blog helps me to spread my way of feeling and thinking and discovering that many people feel the same way. And I translate some pieces I like in English, and I do some collaborative work. And then my podcast is about the lives of other people. So it's not much of an interview, but more like a kitchen talk. So we sit on my kitchen or somewhere else by the river, for example, and then we speak about just life, just mundane things and some maybe values. So really big, huge things, and also some small life things that happen every day. And then I see that the feedback, just like you were speaking about the feedback about your episodes with your husband, the feedback is coming from people that are living totally different lives. So they are sharing the emotions, not the experience, because it's personal, but the emotions, as Brené Brown says, it's really universal how I feel, because Well, humans are not so different. We all have our skeletons and blood and all other things, bodily things.
Yeah, exactly. And a couple things come to mind that I think that what I call gremlins, or we can call the voices, that chatter in our head.
Critics,
Yeah,
yeah.
the chatter that says who you are doesn't matter. Nobody cares about you. You don't do enough. You're not smart enough. You're not thin enough. You're not rich enough. You're not educated enough. Whatever it is, those things are universal. And part of the lie is you're the only one that experiences this, and everybody else has their, we don't swear on the podcast, so we're going to say shirt, take out the R. Everybody else has their shirt together except for you. And what I'm hearing you say is the whole reason that you have the blog and the podcast is really to show that we are all very similar. We all have the same struggles, the same beauties, and it doesn't matter what language we speak or what our culture is. These are universal struggles, and the lie is that we're the only one, and we're not.
And also, I have to say that the purpose of my blogging and making a podcast is not like helping people. Sorry.
No.
I'm doing this to process my feelings and to put somewhere my thoughts, to share something with the people, not selling for the 100th time something, because it really washes out when I tell things for multiple times. And then I just write it with all my heart open, and I'm writing it in the best way possible today, of course. And then I just send a link. If anyone asks me, for example, how were you walking down the Camino de Santiago in 2015? Or what do you think about visiting a therapist? And I'm just I'm sending you a link. You can read it in your spare time, because I'm thinking of myself processing things I experience, and then I'm packing them and I'm leaving them behind. And when I write something and when I edit a podcast episode, I then leave it and I can leave something else. So I have space inside of me. Maybe you feel something like this too. And I can put something new into this space. I can feel something new. When I took something I've lived and I separated it from me, and then I can say, okay, you live your life, I live my life, goodbye.
Yeah, well, the words that I would use, and you expressed yourself beautifully, is we have things that move us, that we feel, that we want to understand. And so we all have different ways of expressing, whether we're an artist or a baker or a podcaster or a writer. It doesn't matter, that what we produce is an expression of what's going on internally. And what I'm hearing you say, if I'm understanding you correctly, is when you write or podcast, it's about something that's on your heart. Yeah. You're expressing so that you can understand it, and you're doing it for yourself, not to try and gain listeners or followers.
Yeah.
And then it allows you to create space for more things to come up and express, that's a process that really works for you.
Yes, and let it go.
Right. I think that sense of expression is so important. And I keep having this thought that's really elusive. It keeps coming and going, so I'm having a hard time grabbing onto it. What I really think is that people are craving authenticity. I think with so much social media that we see these really perfect reels and it looks like everybody's having this great life, I think people are craving to see that it's not always perfect, that we struggle, we have things that are challenging, that we're imperfect. I think people are really wanting to see what life is really like behind this perfect veneer. I mean, what do you think?
I think that works of Brené Brown are really crucial in my experience, because I even named the URL of my website Authenticity First, because it really helps me when I type it to remember what is first, what I want to put first. And then the name of Non-Ideal Stories for the blog and the podcast helps me to remember that as I'm a recovering perfectionist, aspiring well in a feast, I read it somewhere, and it helps me to remember what I'm striving to do. It helps me to remember that I'm not an image. I am 3D, three-dimensional person. I'm real. And yes, I am really imperfect. And I want to stop like creating image, and I want to live, and I want to maybe in some ways to be a role model for myself. And in some ways, I want to share how I see the world today, because tomorrow I will see it differently. And I want to like pinpoint the today's view so I could return to it and people can watch me doing something. I'm okay with this right now. And I think the world is so difficult. We live in such a complex world. We have so many things to consider right now. We have so many points of in identities, in our personalities. So it's really so complex. And I stopped trying to manage this in a perfect way because I don't have so much energy to keep it. So I'm better off now in letting myself be. It's really hard to like let myself be in an imperfect way, but it really saves me so much energy to work on my stuff.
Right. I love that. There's so much I want to talk about. I want to go back to this book that you mentioned about Too Much, How to Channel Intrusive Thoughts. Are you able to share with the listeners some of the ways that you manage intrusive thoughts, or sometimes what we call overthinking?
Well, the main thing about this is acknowledging that I'm really have this like, how do you say it, neurological system in my body. So like my body works in a different way, like a highly sensitive person, like a person with the overthinking brain. So when someone says, oh, you think too much, you go so deep, you don't have to. Now I know this is not true. This is the truth of this person. It's not mine. So now I'm letting myself be whatever I am. So the first thing I stopped doing is like avoiding being myself. And when for example, when I am flying away, when I'm going to the airport, I know that I will be panicking. I know that I will be like checking all the boxes. Will it be okay? Will I get there in time? Do I have a passport? Do I have money? Do I have credit card? Do I have keys? Everything is okay. Did I close the window? So everything I do is my work of being me. So it's really okay if I am in the environment that needs me thinking a lot of things. It's okay. It's how I manage it. It's how I am built. So when I stop trying, like, when I stop trying to be someone else, it really helps.
I love that. Go ahead.
Because, when you try not to overthink, you overthink overthinking. And then you blame yourself for blaming yourself for overthinking.
Yep.
It's the main source of draining my energy, really.
Right. And what I love that you said is, the words that I would use are that you honor how you're wired and you accept it. And I feel like I always have these rants that there's someone who's doing a lot of writing about highly sensitive people. And I just saw a post that said 5 ways to stop overthinking. And I like, it makes my heart hurt that we're wired to be deep processors and we're going to care about things and we're going to be great troubleshooters and forecasters. And so it feels like the message is there's something wrong with overthinking and I'm going to show you how to stop it. And what I hear you saying is, I know that if I'm going to travel, I'm going to be thinking about all of these things. This is how I'm wired and I'm okay with it. And so instead of fighting it, we own it. It doesn't mean that your whole trip is about like, did I leave the iron on? Did I leave the lights on? But you're creating space to know like, these are things I'm going to think about and they can come up and I can acknowledge it, but it's not like that's how my whole vacation is going to be. And I think that's such a powerful and beautiful message that you're able to really embrace. Like, this is what goes on for me. I love it.
Yes. And when I can bring it with others. For example, the last vacation I took was to Berlin. And when the taxi driver was riding me on Uber to the airport, he was really sensitive also. And he felt something is wrong. And I'm on the back seat and I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just tossing and turning and checking everything. And he was like, maybe I need to change the music on the radio. Maybe you need water. There is water on the door, and maybe I need to close the window or something. Tell me how to help you. And I
Oh.
was really I was glad he acknowledges something is wrong. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really felt how other people can feel it. So then I was really brave, and I'm so grateful for myself that I can do this. I told him, I'm really anxious because I'm leaving today, and well, I'm living for 34 years old on this earth, and I already know that nothing can be helped. And I just need to go somewhere, and then the next day will come, and I will be in another mood. So this will not cease itself until I am going to the airport. Then the airplane is there, and then I'm there, and then I'm going through the customs, and then in Berlin I'm taking some bus and some subway, and I'm coming to the Airbnb apartment. I'm checking where the keys are, and then I'm inside. I'm trying to get Wi-Fi work, and then I'm just, whew, okay, let's move on. And it
Right.
cannot be helped. And then when he asked and I answered this, and he was like, okay, but he was like, comfort plus class. So he was
Mm-hmm.
silent. And then I felt so really easy. And then I was able to look through the window, and I was just, oh, I can do this. It's a big change. And then it was a really hot day, and I saw the dog over the window in the house. So we were in a traffic jam, and there is a building, and on the second floor the window was open, and there was like a big dog, some, I don't know, well, beautiful dog, and she was sitting there and watching us. And I was just like, hey, do you see that dog? And he laughed. And it was really nice to know there is also another sensitive person, and I can speak for myself, and I cannot be guilty of being sensitive person going to the airport and feeling anxious. And then he can understand me, and we can watch the dog, and I wouldn't see this funny dog from the window if I was anxious.
Right. I mean, to me, it's such a beautiful example of self-care on both of your parts, that he was picking up on something that was going on with you, and he could have fretted about it, but he kind of was direct about, I sense something's going on. What can I do to help?
Yeah.
And that created space for you to say, hey, I'm traveling and I'm kind of worried and I'm kind of anxious. So then just naming what was going on allowed both of you to be present to enjoy this gift of seeing this beautiful dog. It's not like this stuff is rocket science, and it's not that we have to stop being who we are. It means just honoring what's going on, and that frees up room to enjoy what's going on in the moment. I think it's just a beautiful example. So thank you for that.
Thank you for asking. And also there is a phrase, I'm not okay, and this is okay. And there are so many times it applies to me.
I love that. Again, I think it's just naming, like, I'm feeling really uncomfortable right now and I can tolerate it. So I'm not okay, and this is okay.
Well, it's not like just, it's a lots of work at therapy sessions.
Yeah.
And also about acknowledging emotions, which for highly sensitive people who were not being grown up in a families with any highly sensitive people around, is really hard work now when we are adults, and we can understand how crucial this is, how needy we are to understand what's going on with us. So to make it priority, to work through it, to start acknowledging we have some emotions, and then to communicate it with others. Well, it's not just, but now it feels like just.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Can you tell me a little bit about what the general culture and values are in Russia and how that's been for you and how you've navigated how you show up in the world based on what the expectations are of being Russian?
Yeah, there is Russia and there is Russia. So I was born in Moscow, which is not Russia, and also I'm living in St. Petersburg, which is also not Russia. So my country is huge, and all the most of the money and most of the power and most of the aspiring people come to Moscow.
Okay.
So I believe in US there are several huge cities, and people come to whatever city they have to have some like experience of living in a major city. And in Russia, it is really the hierarchy. So there is Moscow, which is the source of power and government and money and many jobs and all of this stuff. And many people come there and want to live there because the price of the life is the highest, but also there are so many opportunities. And also there is St. Petersburg, it's the second capital. It's called cultural capital, and also the Northern Venice. But I guess it's not the only city that is called Northern Venice. There are many of them over the globe. So in St. Petersburg, it's more snobbish, and it's more cultural, and it's more of like not about statues, but about knowing some intelligent people, being really polite, and like living the whole life, not searching for status and money, but search for like interesting and full life, as I see it, of course. Many others see it in other ways. And I can speak only for being St. Petersburg Russian and Moscow Russian. Sorry, I wouldn't speak for all the Russia because in villages, in smaller towns, life is really different and maybe not so close to what I see in Berlin, for example, or London or Paris, because I go to the same like craft beer spots and hipster third wave coffee houses as I were walking into in Berlin 2 weeks ago, So my life as a project manager in a huge IT Russian company is not so different from the people of like similar lifestyle in major European or maybe even like Canadian or American capitals,
Mm-hmm.
But I can say this thing. I love the episodes about CEN, child emotional neglect,
Mm-hmm.
or children emotional neglect.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard that it's common in the families of immigrants, right?
It can be, yes.
Because the parents are working so hard, they're striving, they're trying to give their children the best life they can afford. And so they are switching the mindset, they're using different language maybe, or both languages of their region and of their new country. And I can say that in Russia, we had this war and we had this USSR time and perestroika. And it's pretty, about generations.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty generational issue. So we are all a little bit like those migrant families because our parents, millennials parents are often were really striving hard to provide the life for us. And their parents didn't have even time to work with emotion. And so we are lacking of emotional language. We don't have instruments to understand what is happening with us. So really, lots of passive aggressive things around here because, well, it's not polite to say something, but it's polite to like manipulate saying something. And there is no culture of like seeing other people, to acknowledge their difference. Many people have so few personal space, so few time for themselves, so few opportunities. So, well, they cannot be generous because they still are striving, many of them. And many others maybe are not striving, but they are trying to give their children better future. They're trying to grasp all the world we have now with all the internet and possibilities and YouTube and English and all this stuff. So much is happening right now. It's so hard to prioritize emotional work,
Mm-hmm.
and so it is really rare and precious.
Go ahead.
Yeah, rare and precious, I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I think that when our focus is on survival and getting our basic needs met, or you're acculturating to a new culture, that all of our emotional needs and our need for rest and for play and for spiritual needs is often are not the priority because it's about survival. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, clothing, food, and shelter are going to be the first things that you need to do. I'm not saying that it makes it okay. I'm just acknowledging and affirming what you're saying. And children need all of those things in order to develop into healthy, happy, secure children. Parents do the best they can. So I'm not annihilating anybody for what they're doing. I'm just kind of saying it makes sense why this happens.
The problem is not really with parents. The problem is with this really unsecure, not really stabilizations, cultural surroundings where I was born in 84, so great year to be born, considering all this stuff which is happening right now. But, I was a first grade pupil in 91st, and every time I look around, something is going to happen, different things. But it is not like I don't feel secure. I didn't feel secure in my life, I guess. And it's somehow normal here. So it's like, well, anything can go to hell any day. You just never know. So you prepare for for something going south. And so in this situation, there is no way to make yourself comfortable enough to rest. You need to have financial means. You need like a financial pillow to fall onto if there is another crisis, as we've seen many. And it's like it's a nervous laugh. It's not funny, but it's really existential thing here. So that like you will die someday, and there is a possibility something will blow up around, and somehow you learn to live with this, and you learn to maybe even joke around it, maybe even humor one another. And many people around are living worse, and you try to help someone if you can, but not to be like a helper, not in this triangle of helper, aggressor, saver. And it's really hard to feel that the world is not shaking, that you have like the foundation to step onto. And if you don't have it, well, part of you is resting and one eye is also open, just in case.
Right. So how did you navigate being a highly sensitive person, being vulnerable? You obviously have a very distinct point of view. How did you navigate that, being in a culture that doesn't really honor, value, or see that?
Well, I'm also queer and I'm also introvert.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also single for last 2 years, and I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And all these things, they separate me from majority, pretty much. So I discovered that I will not try to fix something that is not broken, inside of me. So
Mm-hmm.
I acknowledged that I'm not broken. And considering all this that you've said, I am really strong, I cannot understand how me and many others I know, like highly sensitive people living here, considering the circumstances, how did we manage to go through this? But now, after my 3 years of personal therapy, I'm so much stronger. And I know that there are hard things. There are things that that I'm afraid of. There are things that make me sad. Lots of things, and I feel the pain. And as Pema Chodron said, you probably are familiar with her. Brené Brown mentioned her in her books, so I found her books and I read it. Do you know her?
Mm-hmm. I do.
Yeah, she said that you might let all these feelings flow through you. So she said a really funny thing that if you're angry, it will stop after 90 seconds. But if you will not let it go through you, it will stay with you for 13 years. So just sit with it, try to let the anger take you for 90 seconds. Probably it will go away like faster.
Yeah.
And this, I guess I am fully formed now. I'm 34, so I guess I cannot change the atmosphere I was born into. I didn't ask to be born into for the first place. And for the second thing, I didn't ask to be born in Soviet Russia. But, well, it happened. And I cannot change the way how the circumstances, the people around me, my family had formed me. But I can change how I am behaving right now. I can change what I am supporting, the people I am surrounding myself with. I can change what values do I admire now. I can change what do I read, what do I speak for, what do I believe in. And these things are making me even stronger.
I love that. I mean, what I hear you saying consistently throughout this entire interview is, this is how I am. This is how I'm wired. I'm going to be okay with it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was going to use the word unapologetic and I thought that was a little cliche, so I tried to not say it. But, even with the anger, it's like I can allow myself to feel anger and I can have 19 seconds of anger or I can have 13 years of anger. Which one do I want? That I really see you coming from a place of acceptance and choice. And it doesn't mean that we don't struggle. It doesn't mean that we have perfect lives. But, I've shared about something happens and I go into judgment and then I go into judgment about the judgment. And then I go into feeling like I'm an imposter.
Oh, I love so much those episodes of yours. Yeah.
And so when we can name it, even if I'm in it and I go like, I'm judging that now I feel like I'm an imposter and I'm judging that I feel like, that's part of naming it. It doesn't mean that we don't feel it. It means that we go like, this kind of stinks right now and this is what's going on and I'm uncomfortable and I don't like it. And it's just the way it is. That's how we move through it. And that's exactly what I hear you sharing. I just love it.
And also, as feminism teaches us, women can get angry and this is okay. We do not need to be optimistic, pleasing, listening all the time. No, I can be angry if something is happening, if my boundaries are ruining by someone. And then I can use that anger to stand for something I believe is right.
Yeah. And anger can be really mobilizing for us. That often my experience is that depression depletes my energy and I go very inward. Depression for me sometimes is about anger that I don't experience. And so anger can really be mobilizing for us when we get angry, and it can be an indicator that something's not okay. You're stepping on my foot. You need to get off of my foot. And I need to tell you to get off of my foot. There's nothing wrong with it, and we don't have to be afraid of our anger. So I love that.
But some people do not like it. But if I'm consistently angry when something is not okay, they understand that this is how I am, or they can step back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And not everybody's going to be a good fit for us. I mean, I posted something today about you're not too much. And I think you and I had talked about this. So if someone tells you you're too much, how do you respond to that?
I think I can say, well, it's your experience. Well, let's consider the example that happened with me, actually. One of my acquaintances told me that I am too hard sometimes, that they need to overthink things to be nice to me, because I can see some minor things that are not important for others. So it's like a hard work speaking with me, and they need to prepare themselves, and it's easier to have a good laugh with someone who is not highly sensitive. I think it's exactly what you're asking, right? And then, well, I was so angry. And I let myself be angry, and then I told them that first, I overthink everything, and this is my reality. So welcome to my head. This is how it feels for me every day of my life. And then I am overthinking everything, so you will not be uncomfortable speaking with me. And I guess it's polite for me. So maybe I should have conversation with people who also think about me being comfortable. So it's only fair, right? If I put so much into the conversation, it's only fair to have conversation with people who put also something from their side. And then I said, you don't need to speak to me all the time. But if you do, and you need it for some reason, or you like it for some reason, well, I appreciate that. But I also appreciate that you understand that this is how I am working, operating every day of my life. This is my head that I take to bed in the evening, and that will turn on in the morning. This is my life. This is my experience. If you experience this only when we have a conversation, well, it's nice, but it's not my experience. I live with this every minute of my day.
Yeah, I love that. And what you're saying is, this is how I am. I don't need to change for you. I'm not too much or overthinking, that maybe this is what I need in my life. And I just would love to see more and more people express that. And I think it's so easy because we get messages about, we overthink, or we're too much, or we're too dramatic, or too picky, or whatever it is. And then I
have a new one, actually.
What's that?
I have a word, unique. You're so unique. Last week, I got it 4 times. And those were the times when I took a stand and I said, this is not appropriate to me. This is how I see things. This is how I live. This is how I experience. And then I thought, well, I'm not so unique. It's just that people are afraid to say this to you, and I'm not.
Right, right. So instead of making it about us, it's about the other person there. And I don't mean to sound judgmental, but the too much is well, maybe I have a bigger capacity for feelings than you do. And so maybe, your sense of overwhelm or me being too much is about, you don't like to go deep on things. You don't think about things. You don't feel about things in the way that I do. We can both be okay, but for you to tell me that there's something wrong with me because I'm different from you, no, thank you.
And maybe it's not safe with you to speak about things that I find valuable. And this is the also points about queer people that I hear all the time, like, well, I haven't seen any queer people before, like I was speaking to you. And I was just like, no, you see them all the time. You're not safe to talk to. Okay.
Right. Or people have an idea of this is what queer looks like. And so there may be people that they're even in relationships with, but because it doesn't fit their stereotype of queer, it flies under the radar. It's really hard when we have assumptions about people and groups of people. We have an option now. We're getting close to the end of time. We can either do some of the typical HSP questions, or I can ask you some general questions. Where would you like to go?
Well, I can say that I have more time. If you have some, I'm okay with that. And what do you mean general questions?
Well, the things that we've been talking about, or I sent you a list of questions that I ask most guests. So I do want to try and keep the interview to close to an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to answer some of the questions that I sent you ahead of time, or do you want to just keep talking the way that we're talking?
I want to keep talking.
Okay. You had mentioned that you have a favorite song. What's your favorite song?
I had mentioned this. I don't remember. Which one was that?
Gloria Gaynor.
Oh, yeah, I wrote it. Well, I have lots of favorite songs, but this song is a little bit about being a highly sensitive person. So, yeah, I wrote it to you. So, in my childhood, we had those audio tapes. You remember them also, right?
The cassette tapes, yes.
Yes, I had some pirated, I guess, tape. On the one side, it was Beatles. Some songs like Yesterday, Michelle, and Hello, or Help, something with H. And on the other side, it was I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. And I didn't know anything about queer people at the time, but I loved that song. And I was listening to it. I didn't understand what she was like talking about, but it was so powerful. And now, as I'm grown, like an adult, I understand that to have that power in the song, you have to survive lots of things. It's like about Nina Simone and other people. They sing so powerfully, not because like it's powerful song, but because they lived through something really hard, so they know their truth. So now when I listen to this song, it really reminds me of, well, how did we really went through this stuff? How did we, and me also, keep ourselves alive? And maybe we're a little bit broken, like the Japanese art of making broken objects with a golden lining, and these wounds are seen, these scars are seen. But well, really, if we survived that, you cannot stop us, really.
Right. I remember as a teenager working out to that song, and it was just incredibly powerful. I think I'd probably broken up with a boyfriend or didn't get what I want. And I remember just listening to that song over and over and how powerful it was. And then can you explain a little bit more? I know what you're talking about with the Japanese. When a piece of pottery breaks, they use gold to fill in the cracks. And can you explain why they do that?
Well, I believe they think that broken things are not ruined things. So it's not trash. It's a way to rebuild on this foundation. So if there is something broken, you can just keep having it while making these parts coming whole again with the golden like threads or something. And this is the same about ourselves. When I walk around St. Petersburg, it's a beautiful city, but many of buildings are not like well maintained. And when I see those facades, beautiful facades from 18th century, I think, well, I am like them. I am a little bit broken, a little bit like dirty, a little bit still beautiful. And then I just am here and they are here. And we can greet ourselves. We can say hello, building, hello, Elena. And then we keep living because that's what we do.
Yep. Well, and it's those flaws and those imperfections that really make us real. That, again, we have that image that everything is supposed to be perfect and airbrushed. There's no connection in that. The connection is in the things that we struggle with, what I call the messy middle. So I'm just affirming what you're saying.
Yeah.
You had talked about Lindsay Gibson's book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
Yeah.
Can you just talk very briefly about that?
Well, I do some translations and I also like edit the translations or some writing. And this book was translated into Russian by my now friend Elena. Also, she lives in Nizhny Novgorod town, and she translated it and she fundraised the amounts of money to like buy the rights and translate it and publish it. And then after that, I got to know her, and now we were working on translation of the workbook about intuitive eating that she also published in Russian. And now we are working on the book Will I Ever Be Good Enough, which is really good book, which will be available in Russian. So the children of emotionally unstable parents by Lindsay Gibson was really like eye-opening to me because it's about expectations. I guess I expected that someday many people, including some relatives of mine, will understand the things I understand now. And they will see how I see this. And this book really helped me to stop doing that, to let people live their truth, to like let them have their version of reality where they are right and I'm wrong. And I gathered so many energy on that. I stopped waiting. So this book helped me to see, yes, some people are also traumatized by some emotionally problematic like childhoods and families and relatives. And they now will not change that for them. It's their choice. It's their decision. And I have to see this as their truth. And it really helped me. And then that book about being good enough was also really nice. And the Peg Strip's work about mean mothers and about other. There are many books from Peg Strip about this. That some people are really okay with the way they see world. They do not have any energy to change this. And they will not see the world from my perspective. And I can be okay with that. After some grieving, of course, but now I can.
Sure. And again, what I love and what I hear you saying, and I think the gift of Dr. Gibson's book is that I think we tend to think that it's about us. There's another great book, and I'll link to it in the show notes, called The Drama of the Gifted Child by Alice Miller.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, as children, when we have adults around us that can't meet our needs, a child needs to survive. And so they make it about them. For a child to say, like, my parent is not able to meet my needs, and this is about my parent's limitation, that kids can't do that. So they think something is wrong with them, and then we internalize that. And kind of in the same way that the negative messaging that we get as highly sensitive people, when we start to recognize that our parents just weren't able to give us what we needed, or we have parents that were emotionally immature, that it wasn't about us, it was about their limitations, and there can be so much freedom in that. And I have to say that a listener sent me an email because she is familiar with Lindsay Gibson's work and I think is a friend of hers and recommended her to be on the podcast. So this last week I had a Zoom call with Lindsay Gibson and we've scheduled a date where she's going to, she's going to be a guest on the podcast and we'll talk about her books. And I think it's just another great way for people that, feel like there was something wrong with them, that it may be that your parents just didn't have the skills, that they were well-meaning and well-intentioned. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But it's not about your value, your preciousness as a human being. Your folks just didn't have the skills to embrace how you came wired.
And also, when we acknowledge this, we can stop keeping trying, pretending, people pleasing. Because when we do all this stuff, we internally we do it to please some adults we had, right? Not people around us, but we do it with everyone because it's a way we try to fight something which was not right for us. And now we can stop doing that. Stop making others okay with us.
Right. There's really a lot of freedom. I mean, it's work, it's ongoing work. My experience has been that even though I read a book or I go to therapy or I get coaching, it helps. And like I share with you in the podcast all the time, life is about things coming up. So we have different tools that maybe initially our reaction is a 10 and it lasts for a really long time. Yeah. But over time, we respond, and the amount of time that it lasts, the intensity that we feel is less and less, and it doesn't totally take us out. Sometimes it does. So I don't want to have judgment. I don't want to have the expectation that if you get tools, then you will live this perfect, blissful life. It's about learning how to lean into whatever comes up. And that's what creates peace for us. Even if it's uncomfortable, we can still have peace and be uncomfortable, but it doesn't feel like it's taking over our lives.
And it's life we're living right now, not we will have someday some life. No, the life is the thing that is happening right now, is what we do with the circumstances we're put in.
Right. Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up? Because we're just about out of time.
I want to thank you for your podcast. It really helped me because when I was reading the books, it was not about imminent experiences. It was more of intellectual, and sharing some common things. And your podcast is about people sharing things that happening with them. So many things that I can apply to myself also. And so it was really validating, and it shaped me in my way of acknowledging that this is okay, this is me, this is my life, I'm okay already.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I believe in what I'm doing, and I have to tell you that there are times when I have doubts. I just went through this, my gremlins came up yesterday, holy, what am I doing? I know that there are a number of therapists that don't agree with the work that I'm doing. I'm very transparent. That's not what therapists do. Maybe I'm getting it all wrong. I'm giving wrong information. I just have to remember that I have this lived experience, and my experience is mine and nobody else's, and that the way that I show up in the world is okay, and that it really is resonating with people. And I have doubts about that sometimes. So I appreciate what you have to say. And I have to go back to, I think people want to know, what does real life look like? What does the messy struggle look like? What does the day-to-day struggle look like? That we can read theories, but what does it look like on a day-to-day basis? So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else before we go?
No.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I like it too.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Hey there. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really love this conversation. I feel so blessed that people from all over the world not only listen, but are guests on the podcast. And I think no matter where we are, we all experience many of the same things, and we really have a deep connection. I hope that you felt that during this interview. If you're interested in learning more about being a highly sensitive person, you want to do some skill building, I'm thinking that about the time you hear this episode, we're going to be running online groups for highly sensitive people. There are only 6 people per group. We're running some groups right now. The changes that I'm seeing in people are just amazing. And we'll be working on things like self-compassion, mindfulness, boundaries, turning the negative messages into superpowers. Did I say perfectionism? Embracing our emotions, creating lifestyles that are HSP friendly. They're really powerful groups. So if you're interested, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a tab for the HSP groups. There's all the information there. If you're interested in working with me individually, go to the same place. I really want every single person who's a deep thinker and a deep feeler to really get to a place where they embrace their sensitivity and are able to name the strengths that they have and are working on creating lifestyles that really work for them. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.